Alright, so I'm going to show you a bunch of tools in Photoshop, but we're going to do the same things that we normally do to start with. So I'm going to open a picture with Photoshop. Okay, so I have the picture here. The first thing I'm going to do is crop it like we always do. So I'm going to come in, kind of even it out a little bit on the sides. Down a little here maybe. Alright. Now, on your toolbar, you notice that the crop marks are still here. To get rid of those, you can come in and hit the top one on the toolbar. And that's the moving tool. That's sort of your default resting spot. So here's the picture here. One of the things that we want to do after we crop it is we want to use levels to make sure that there isn't any empty pixels. Now, how does this histogram look? This is the shadow areas, the midtones, and the highlights. It looks very good, right? Even pixels all the way throughout. So really, we don't need to make any adjustments on this one. So we're going to leave that one alone, even though we can keep that adjustment layer there. But the next thing we want to do is, what I see in here is that the face is a little bit dark, right? So there are tools in Photoshop to lighten up specific areas, and those are called dodging and burning tools. And they're about 2/3 of the way down on your toolbar. If you right mouse click, you'll see the dodging tool here and the burning tool here. The dodging tool lightens up areas, and the burning tool darkens areas. If you think of burning like sunburn, it makes you darker, you'll get that that's what that is. That's to make specific areas darker. The dodging tool is to make specific areas lighter. Those of you not taking notes, you should take notes. I promise you, you should take notes. So we're going to use, do you think we should use the dodging or the burning tool here? Dodging, because our face is a little bit dark, right? It's very light on the outside, but it's very dark in the middle. So I want to just lighten up that specific area. Okay? So in order to do that, I have to be on the background layer. So I want to click that layer. Clicking that layer. Then I'm going to come over here to the dodging tool, and you're going to see that I'm going to have a brush. Okay? It's a circle. Any tool that you click on Photoshop that has a circle means it has a brush, that it has become a brush. We can change the size of our brush by moving the left and right bracket keys on our keyboard. The left bracket key makes it smaller, the brush smaller. The right bracket keys makes the brush bigger. Okay, brush smaller with the left bracket keys, the right bracket keys makes it bigger. The bracket keys are located right next to the P on your keyboard. Look at the keyboard and see where that is. Right next to the keyboard are the bracket keys. Okay? That makes your brush bigger or smaller. You also have a brush palette. If you look up in the upper left-hand corner of Photoshop here, I'm circling around it, so eyes on the screen for a minute. If I click down, you also see that I can change the size of my brush by moving this, but this way I have to keep coming back and forth. So if I slide this over, I come out and check the size. I slide this over and check the size. Slide it over, so it's a lot harder than using the bracket keys. The bracket keys are much, much easier. But also I can control the hardness of the brush, so it can have a fuzzy soft edge like this, or it can have a hard edge like this. Whenever we're doing dodging and burning, we want to have a soft edge. So we want this slider, that's the hardness slider, to be all the way on the left. Otherwise, it'll make a sharp edge on something, and we don't want that. Okay, so I can click out of that. So now I want to make the brush a little bit smaller, because I'm going to do it several times in the area that I want to lighten. So I kind of want to lighten this area in here. So I'm going to make the brush a little smaller than that area. Okay? You'll notice at the top there is an exposure. So you see that I think the default on this is 50%. You want to go down somewhere between 10 and 15% on the exposure. Okay? Because you don't want to do it 100% at once or it makes it real obvious. I'll show you that. 100%, you see that you have a stripe there. I don't want a stripe. I want to really work it up to where I want it. So I'm going to come down somewhere between 10 and 15%. Then I'm going to come in here with this as a brush. I hold the left mouse key down because it's exactly like using a brush. I'm going to come over and I'm going to lighten up these areas that are kind of in the shadow here. Just going to come and lighten those up. I'm going to go over it a few times, just like I'm brushing it with a paintbrush. In the smaller areas, I can make my brush smaller. Remember that your left hand, Photoshop is made so that your left hand is on the keyboard and your right hand is on the mouse. So you use the keystrokes as you go along, the mouse to move stuff and your keystrokes on the other one. So now there's no way you notice to check, there's no layer here. So I can't really go back. I can go back to my original and see the difference, but it's also going to show the crop because we did a lot of dodging. But so what I can do instead, if I want to put it on that layer, so I'm going to come back and start over again and show you a better way. So I'm going to crop it, come in, and say OK. We already checked levels, we don't need that, but let's come over here. Now what you want to do with this layer is duplicate that layer, the background layer. I can right click on it and go to duplicate layer, or I can do Control J, whichever one. So I'm going to call this dodging, this layer, because then I have the ability to come back and turn that layer on or off. So now if that layer is selected and I come back and I use my dodging tool here, and I come in and I'm at the 13%, so that's about right, and I'm going to make this a little bigger, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to dodge this again. So I'm going to lighten up the dark areas on her face. Okay, so now when I click that layer on and off, I can see how I lightened her face up quite a bit, right? So I can come in, make this smaller, and keep doing this on these areas. And you can see the difference here, how much I've lightened up that area. That's lightening a specific area, and you see that I have it labeled dodging. Whenever you want to have an adjustment on a layer, that's what the beauty of Photoshop is. Each layer can be a different adjustment, so it's really cool to do that. Okay, so I can turn that on or off. So that's to dodge, to make things a little bit lighter. I can also make things a little bit darker. So let's duplicate the original layer here, and I'm going to call this the burning layer. If I spell it right. Okay, so now let's say I want to darken her hair. So I'm going to come over and I'm going to grab the burning tool. I'm going to make my brush a little smaller by using the left bracket keys. And I can come in and I can just darken her hair around the edges here. I'm at 11%. So if I turn that on and off, whoops, why is that? Oh, that was because it's there. It didn't show because it was below the dodging one. So if I turn this, then you can see the difference. Okay? So now I want to get rid of this little spot. This little spot you could get rid of it two different ways. One way is to use what we call content-aware fill. If we come down to the third tool on our tool palette is the lasso tool. That's to make a selection. It looks like a rope. So you're actually going to go around something that you want to get rid of. You need to touch back to the beginning because you need these marching ants. The marching ants tell you it's a selection. I can right-click in the middle of that and go down to Fill. I want to have Content Aware selected. If something else is on, we want Content Aware on, but that's the default. I say OK, and Photoshop tries to fill around that. Now to deselect that area, I do Control D to make those marching ants go away. Control D makes the marching ants go away. So that's one way. How do I undo a step in Photoshop or two? Control-Alt-Z. Control-Alt-Z. I'm going to go back there and put that back in. The other way to do it is what we call the clone stamp. The clone stamp is right in the middle of your toolbar, and it looks like a rubber stamp. If I click on the clone stamp tool, it's again a brush. I only need it to be slightly bigger than the area I'm going to stamp over. So what the clone stamp does is it takes information from one area and stamps it over another area. Takes information from one area and stamps it over another. So how this one works is you hold the Alt key down, and now you see that my brush turned into a target. That target allows you to define your target area. You want it to be as close in tone and color and texture to the area that you're stamping over. So I'm going to left mouse click here when I had the Alt key on. Then I come over and I can just right mouse click without the Alt key selected, and you see it's taking information from, you see that little plus sign next to it? It's telling you where it's taking the information from and putting it over that. So that clone stamps out that area. Okay? And get rid of that area. Okay? Backing it up, clone stamp. Get as close as you can to the area you want to get the target from, left mouse click, come over and stamp over it, and you get rid of it. Let me show you another one. Let's open another one and show you the same thing. So this one I want to get in, to make my picture bigger or smaller in Photoshop, to look at it, just to view it bigger or smaller, is to use Control plus to make it bigger or Control minus to make it smaller. It doesn't change your actual image size, it just allows you to view it bigger or smaller. Control plus for bigger, Control minus for smaller. Control plus for bigger, Control minus for smaller. Now when I make this bigger, I can see that I need to move it up because I want to show you something at the top. I can do that by holding down the space bar, and you see now that the cursor turned into a hand. Once it's turned into a hand, it means I can move the picture around and look at all the edges of it. So you see that I have these things at the edges I want to get rid of, right? There's one here and one there that are super distracting. Oops, we have that still selected. Super distracting. Okay, I want to get rid of those. So again, I can use Content Aware Fill, which would be very easy here. I'm going to come over, get the lasso tool. Whenever it's on an edge, you just select the inside and then move the cursor around the outside until you meet the end. It'll automatically select the edge of that picture. Right-click in the middle and go to Fill. Content Aware Fill, OK, and it got rid of it. Control D to deselect that area. Now up here I can do Clone Stamp if I want. So I'm going to use Alt to select that area. That's the target, and just come over and paint that off. Use Alt to select this area, come over and get that out. Okay? So we got rid of just these little tiny areas here that were very distracting in the picture. That's the clone stamp. The other thing you can do with the clone stamp that's kind of fun is that you can, I'm going to make the brush hard to show you the difference here. I'm going to come over and I'm going to grab her face and I'm going to move her over here. And now you see, if you look at that, you see how that has a hard edge around it? Right around here you see it has a very hard edge. That's because I had the brush on hard. If I make the brush soft on the clone stamp, if I come back here and I make it back to soft, and I clone stamp her, then the edges will try to blend in a little more. So I'm going to grab that and come over, and you see that the edges kind of try to blend in a little more. Okay? So the clone stamp is very fun to play with, and I know everybody wants to do that. So let me show you, like if I grab a picture like this, what you can do with it. So we will, and the clone stamp holds its last tool, which is kind of annoying. So let's grab this, and we're going to make you have an extra eyeball. Super fun? But if we had a hard edge, it would show the edges around that, right? So if we come back up and we make this hard, it's going to show the edges around that, and we don't want those to be shown. Because then you see it doesn't blend in, right? So the clone stamp's fun for getting rid of stuff you don't need. What I don't want you to use it for is I don't want you to use it for things like trash cans or people, or I don't want you to use it to get rid of a lot of stuff. Only minor things like the edges of those plants there or whatever. Just things that are in the way, trash on the ground, spots on a wall, that kind of thing. Do not use it to get rid of people or trash cans. The other adjustment that we want to use is called brightness and contrast. And under the fill or adjustment layer in Photoshop, we go back here to brightness. There's a brightness and contrast layer. If we click on that, you'll see Photoshop makes its own layer there. And that the brightness or contrast little sliders will pull up. Okay? So those little sliders, brightness makes the whole image lighter or darker, and contrast makes it, the contrast between the lights and the darks more obvious. In a picture like this, it's already very contrasty. We have very strong whites and very strong shadows. So on this picture, I actually want to bring down the contrast instead of bring it up. So I'm going to bring this one down to get a little bit more detail in the shadow areas. And then I'm going to brighten it up. And you notice that I've got detail in the shadow areas. Like now there was no detail in the leaves, and there is detail in the leaves now. If we click that on and off, you can see a big difference in there, right? There's detail in the brick down here, and there's detail in the shadow areas here. If I move it to contrast at the same time, then it takes that away. It makes it look like black almost, like there's super harsh shadows here, super harsh shadows here, and we don't want that. So little tiny adjustments on the contrast and the brightness slider will make a huge difference in your picture. Just even tiny little changes can make a huge difference in your picture. Okay? So you want to use that judiciously. And you can always come back to that. You don't need another brightness and contrast if you decide you need to change it. Just by clicking on this again, and that property window will pop up. So you can change the brightness and contrast. Now in this picture, we can also come in and do the same thing with our, if we want to lighten up our person. So I can come in and dodge her. I need to be on that background layer. It doesn't work otherwise. So I'm going to make it bigger just to get her face. Control plus makes it bigger. Push the space bar down to move the picture over, and then I'm going to lighten up her face. I'm just going to lighten it up here. I want to make sure that I'm at 13 or somewhere between 10 and there. I can come in and just lighten her up. Okay? And make some more detail on her. So she has more detail. When I come back, it's just her that's a little bit lighter. I didn't light anything else up. I could come in and lighten up, other things if I wanted, like come in here and lighten up the foliage on those leaves if I wanted. You can do a lot of different things, right? But you want to make your picture as perfect as possible. You want detail in the shadow areas and the highlights. Now, up here it's almost white, so I'm not going to be able to darken that. When you try to you can't darken or burn in an area that's almost white. No going in that you can't do that. Okay? If it's almost white, you can't do it. So you want to be very careful about that you didn't try to burn in areas that are almost white. People in my first period were trying to do that. So that's the clone stamp, brightness and contrast, and content-aware fill, and burning and dodging. So burning and dodging allows you to selectively darken or lighten specific areas. Darken or lighten specific areas. So if let's open back up. Let's open this one up. So I'm going to open this one, and what do I need to do with this picture? Control plus to make it bigger. I need to darken these areas, and I need to lighten these areas, right? So I have my burning tool. I'm going to make that bigger by using my right bracket key. I'm going to come in and I'm just going to darken those outside edges to get more detail in the ground. And make my brush smaller as I get closer to something. But you stroke it just like a brush. You stroke it just like a brush because you don't want any streaks when you're burning, and it's very easy to happen. Then I want to dodge the flower, because I want to make it a little lighter. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to lighten up where the petals are and around it. So I come in here and I lighten that up. So I'm dodging by making this lighter, and I burn this by making it darker. So if we come back to our original history, and I'll go back to the original, show you the original. There's the difference. Now, because I didn't duplicate that background layer, I have no way to turn anything on or off, which is what I should have done so that we can see that. Because I could duplicate that background layer, and then you can see it. So if I go back to where we were originally, duplicate this background layer, and call this dodging and burning, then I can come back in on that layer, and I can come in and I can do all the dodging here. And I can even dodge some of this background out so we see a little bit more of that. Get this flower nice and white compared to what it was. And then I can burn this outside layer. Not outside, but where the light areas are. Make those darker. And then I can click that layer on and off and see the difference. Okay? It's always good to do that when you know you're going to do a lot of adjustments and you want to be able to get back to change them, is to duplicate that layer and make that an adjustment one on the dodging and burning. Okay? And that's all.